Hello, and welcome to the Resourced and Resourceful Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Christine Pettit, and I'm so excited and grateful to be here with you today. Thank you so much for listening. Today is going to be a bit of a hodgepodge of an episode. I don't have one direct theme, but I am drawing inspiration from a friend, Gordon Edgar, who writes a Sunday list, and it is his musings or whatever is kind of top of mind for him through the week. Some maybe articles that he's read or thinking about the current political climate or the music that he's listening to. And I was thinking about that for this episode. There are some things that I want to talk about that don't necessarily fit in one particular theme. So I'm going to call this my Thursday list. And I think there are about 7 things on this list today. Some of it is pulling on threads or continued threads from previous episodes, including some listener feedback and a message from one of our listeners, Helen, who, if you haven't listened to the interview with her yet, I encourage you to do so, and I'll link that in the show notes. And in addition to pulling some of those threads from previous episodes, I'm going to talk about what I'm drinking these days and eating, what I'm listening to, what I'm planning, and just wanting to share and connect with you around these things. Is that right? Yeah. So I think it's going to be fun. Hopefully, if you like hearing me talk about things and are curious what's on my mind, then this will be a good episode for that. And if not, that's okay too. But I am always curious what's on your mind and would love to hear from you as well. So I, of course, will make some invitations for that at the end of the show. So, first of all, number 1, the Mindy interview. I had the pleasure of getting together with Mindy Friedman on Sunday. We went to a book reading and signing like a book release party that she told me about. Evelyn R. Carter, PhD, released a book recently called Was That Racist? And Mindy suggested to me that I interview her for the podcast. So I don't know Evelyn, Dr. Carter yet, but I was curious and wanted to support her that she's having a book release. And so that's really exciting. So I went, heard her read a little bit, and have started digging into the book myself. And so she may be a guest on the podcast in the near future, but it was really nice that Mindy invited me to that event. And so good to see her in person. And, but that's not what I want to talk about. What I've been meaning to share is just like this funny thing that because I listen to the Good Hang podcast occasionally, and our interview was inspired by that. The format that I did with Mindy was inspired by that format. I noticed that Amy Poehler says that she's talking well behind her guest's back, not good behind her guest's back. And I know grammar and all of that, but over and over in the episode, I said that we're going to talk good behind Mindy's back because I thought it was like this cutesy kind of thing that Amy Poehler was saying. Also, you do say, oh, we talked bad behind their back, which probably it should be poorly or whatever. So anyway, this is a weird grammar thing. I just felt like sharing. I do know the difference between good and well. And now that I keep hearing Amy Poehler say talk well behind their back, I was like, did I just totally mishear that before? it's not really that important, but I thought it was funny. Okay, moving on to more serious topics. The last episode that I did, so this is number 2, the last episode that I did was talking about ice, talking about what we're seeing in Minneapolis, but also what I know is happening in the Long Beach community, how I'm processing it all, and my relationship to social media and taking these things in through social media, as well as my my connections to the case of Renee Good in particular, and a connection in terms of some shared identities, but also shared experiences around monitoring police activity and studying policing. And ICE are not police, but are certainly being lumped in and acting in this law enforcement capacity. And so I got a lovely message from Helen, and I'm going to play that now.
Hi, Christine. I'm still finishing up the episode, but what I'm deeply appreciating is that you are speaking to it. You're speaking to your process of taking in the news. You're speaking to how it's impacting you. You're speaking to how you are choosing actions based on what we are witnessing, how it's impacting us individually and collectively. And because I've been sitting with this as well, I've been sitting with the reality of like, oh, this is not going to stop anytime soon. And not that I was expecting it to stop per se. It's just becoming a bigger reality. Like it's cementing itself into my consciousness as like, this is our daily life and it's going to get worse. And I am not on social media. Like sometimes I'm not even on Instagram because I do get sucked into watching the videos and it sends me off into a very helpless place. And typically I don't feel helpless. Like I feel like I am at choice. I have a lot of agency. And it was really devastating to watch these videos and be witness to them. To know that it happens already is already very devastating. It did compel me to sign up for rapid response training and patrolling possibly. So I'm going to go to a training next Saturday because I feel like there's no real clear sense of what the limits are with this administration. And I think learning some new skills and tools is going to support me in supporting our communities. So that's what I got to share. It's definitely been weighing on my heart and weighing on how I'm holding responding to myself in the grief and how I'm holding in my consciousness how this is affecting everyone collectively. So anyway, just wanted to leave you a voice note to share that. And it's not on SpeakPipe. I thought about how this should be on SpeakPipe. But yeah, leaving it here. Thank you for the podcast, Christine.
So she sent that message as a voice note, and that's perfectly wonderful. In fact, SpeakPipe limits the messages right now to 90 seconds, I think, because it's a free plan, or I don't know. So it was nice to get a lovely 2.5 minute plus message from Helen, and I just so appreciated her. She texted me and gave me permission to share this and said, she first texted and said, I'm listening to your most recent episode and just expressing my deep appreciation for you. And I was like, oh my goodness. I said, oh, thank you. And I asked, I'm curious if anything in particular resonated with you and or how you're holding everything. And then she shared her message. And I, of course, said thank you so much. I just really appreciate her sharing her reflections and just to know how and what she's doing in the moment. And then we went on to talk a little bit more. She said, I hear all the emotion in your voice. Thank you for sharing from this place. And also, unrelated but related, learning from Simone and seeing you practice sharing your process is really powerful. She's referencing Simone Soul, who is a coach that I've learned a lot from. And I've talked about her, has really inspired even the way that I show up in this podcast and taking the leap to share what's on my mind and to share it imperfectly. So I said, yes, lots of emotions, and yes, showing the process and letting myself be in process. There's no one perfect destination. She says, I get it now to share your humanity, who you are, and that connects with you with others. And if not now, when? I said, yes. And then Helen says, you and your work are such gifts. And the medicine, thank you, Christine. So grateful for you. And I say, thank you, Helen. I am so grateful for you as well. And I am. Thank you, Helen. And thank you to those who are listening who are just holding this moment in different ways, who are engaged in different ways, who are trying to make sense of it, who are in process. And I referenced Gordon earlier. I know Gordon through Laurie Jones Neighbors, who's come up multiple times on this podcast. Gordon is Laurie's widower, and I feel grateful to be connected with him. And so he writes the Sunday list, and I asked if I could share a little bit about what he wrote the Sunday after the shooting and murder of Renee Good. And he said, of course. So I'm grateful for that. He's written other things as well, but I really like Gordon's Sunday lists because there have been many times when it's just like a snippet into his world and it's interesting, but also a lot of times I relate to and appreciate his analysis of the particular moments that we're in politically. And that could be sometimes like the very local Bay Area politics where he's at, or California, or the national. But I just appreciate his takes on things. And so the Sunday after the killing of Renee Good, he wrote a number of things about the ICE occupation of Minneapolis. Starting with, I don't know that there's anything smart to say about the ICE occupation of Minneapolis that hasn't already been said. And I feel that, and I still feel like it's important to speak up and say it. I also want to just call out, I appreciate in his most recent Sunday list, there was a link to donate to Stand With Minnesota. And there's also just some great writing on the ground, but they do mutual aid and materials purchasing. Standwithminnesota.com says stay informed, testimonials, action, give. I encourage you to check that out. It's a good way to be active in what is happening there. And of course, there are many ways to be active in your local communities as well and at the national level, but I wanted to share that resource. Okay, where is Gordon's face? So I think part of it is noticing how people are scrutinizing these videos, especially people on the right, and justifying or like trying to talk about what is legal and what makes sense in the law. I was listening to something else. Oh, it might have been Tangle News, but I'm not sure. I don't think so. I think it was something else, but it was talking about people making a legal argument versus a moral one, what we can see with our eyes. But anyway, he writes about this logic of justifying the killing of good and other state sanctioned murders. And so he says, first, their logic is that a death sentence is appropriate for the smallest act of disobedience to law enforcement. In the Good video, taken by the murderer, whose main purpose was to show that Good and her wife were queer, the license plate and both their faces were filmed. That means that even if they were committing some heinous crime, which clearly they weren't, I'm just what ifing, they could have been arrested later peacefully. But no, it was their identity combined with lack of deference to a man with a government-issued gun that marked them as worthy for death, no matter how small the quote-unquote crime. And that is something that I related to, that he wrote about, because one, it's just, yeah, we are not, like, disobedience does not equal death. If that's what happened, if there was disobedience, which there were a lot of confusing orders going on and whatever, but even if there was disobedience, even if there was a crime, that is no reason to shoot your weapon at somebody. There's no reason for that. Even if there is disobedience, even if there's breaking the law, that should not equal a death sentence. And I don't believe in the death sentence anyway, but certainly not one without a trial and due process and whatnot. And then he writes, second, we the people are supposed to act without mistake. We actually even need psychic powers to know the exact way to avoid death amongst conflicting orders in a confusing situation that is likely brand new, stressful, and fast-moving to us. Cops, on the other hand, get to be emotional, exhausted, confused, rash, and make poor decisions even when, especially when, they kill us. Doesn't that seem a little backwards? Yes. Yes, it does. I share this just to, one, share my appreciation for Gordon's writing and to continue the thread related to ICE and what is happening. And this is very real and tangible, even in Long Beach, as I mentioned, where there's not a heavy occupation at the moment. Just this week, 2 gardeners were taken from a house that they were working at in East Long Beach. And yes, this is happening all around us. I also wanted to go back to like some of why I am appreciating Tangle News, which I mentioned in the last podcast, something that I've been listening to. But I appreciated their coverage too around Renee Good. I just want to shout out. The reason I like Tangle is because they're very transparent. About looking at news sources on the left and right, what they're saying, what their take is. They went back and reviewed all their stories, like not all their stories, but their top stories from 2025, and basically ranked their takes, rated or graded their takes based on what has played out in the news and the different aspects that they were looking at, and give themselves a grade. And most recently shared an episode where they shared some of the text message or Slack message back and forth about their editorial decisions and writing and how they tried to stay true to their mission. And their mission being independent, nonpartisan, subscriber supported newsletter, podcast, and to be a trusted source and credible source. And I appreciated the take. Let me just see. I'm looking it up. Renee Good. Ice shooting. Oh, where is it? I will cut this part out. Okay, there it is. So they cover the ICE shooting in Minneapolis. And the headline is very straightforward: the ICE shooting in Minneapolis. And then an ICE agent shot and killed a U.S. citizen in Minnesota. So they do share the facts as they understood them at the time, gave some background information, said what the left is saying, and I'll just share the bullet points. What the left is saying. The left is appalled by the shooting, and many worry about the fallout from the incident. Some say ICE's presence in cities made violent confrontations inevitable. Others say the ICE agent involved in the shooting can and should be prosecuted. And then they pull out more there. What the right is saying. The right is saddened by the shooting, but many say the agent's actions appear to be legally justified. Some argue the left's demonization of ICE set the stage for violence. Others criticize political leaders for jumping to conclusions about the incident. And this was written on January 8th, so very early on, I think the morning after, I believe. I appreciate it. So the executive editor, Isaac Saul, wrote, Renee Good was 37 years old, the mother of 3 children, a poet, a wife. He said, it's a long take, but what I liked there was also this connection to humanity. And he wrote, when Charlie Kirk was assassinated, one of the things that struck me was that I could see myself in him. A young dad, political commentator, a podcast host, someone who does public events. As a result, I did my best to emphasize his humanity. Here again, this killing hits home. My wife is a mom in her 30s and a public defender in Philadelphia. In the last few months, some of her clients have been snatched up by ICE while attending scheduled immigration hearings. What if she got caught in the middle or responded with fear in any way that police viewed as resisting or interfering? Would millions of people jump to the conclusion that she deserved to be killed for the crime of standing between ICE and an immigrant alleged to be here illegally? These feelings are tough for me to shake. Why did an ICE agent pull his firearm on a 37-year-old American woman who looked like she was trying to leave the scene in her car? What threat did she reasonably pose to them? What immigration enforcement are they conducting in preventing her from leaving? Would we have a better outcome if they simply let her leave? What are we even doing here? An American citizen has been killed by immigration officers, and for what? Who was made safer? What community benefited? There's a lot more there. Like, his analysis is, his take is in depth and looks at a lot of different angles, but the bullet points, to summarize it, where this killing is a predictable result of the Trump administration's aggressive, provocative deportation campaign. Debate over legality is justified, but the White House is spreading falsehoods from a moral and practical standpoint. I think the shooting was clearly unjustified. So maybe it was on Tangle that I was hearing them talk about the divide of people or arguing legally versus morality. Anyway, I hope it's interesting to you to hear some of what I am taking in and reflecting on. Charlie Kirk and Renee Good obviously are very different people in different circumstances, and yet they are humans. They were humans both, and I really believe in seeing humanity beyond party. Yeah, and it's not our job to decide who lives and dies. I just really believe that. I don't believe that this is justified in any way. And yeah, I'm just sitting with all of that. Let's see. This is definitely the imperfect process of processing things out loud. Gordon later on also mentions a report from 2014 that Border Patrol agents have deliberately stepped in the path of cars to justify shooting at the drivers and have fired in frustration at people throwing rocks from the Mexican side of the border, according to an independent review of 67 cases that resulted in 19 deaths. So, this idea of training or deliberately putting themselves in situations like this to justify violence, I think is something that we should be aware of when we see patterns of policing and law enforcement and kind of thinking about the broader picture. Okay, I told you this was gonna just be like a, hey, these are some things on my mind. So there's a part of me that's coming up that is, Christine, what you're sharing is like totally imperfect, or it might seem like people might question your values or whatever. But I am gonna let it be. It doesn't need to be perfectly packaged. I am actively thinking through things and I invite conversation. Okay. And just as I'm switching gears, I just see the Stand With Minnesota page. Stay informed about what's happening and some different news outlets and independent media, as well as some testimonies. So, for transparency's sake, I wanted to let you know that I paused the recording at this point and I went to my very first spin class at the gym that I go to, and that was really good. I needed to get a workout in today. It was challenging for sure. And as I was reflecting on what I recorded so far, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna scrap all of this week, read a poem for the podcast, clean this up, and make it more smooth and palatable, and be more careful with my words and intentional with my words. And I had convinced myself that would be kinder to you, dear listeners, which perhaps that is right. And I'm not going to do that. I'm going to let this be what it is and move forward with my list. So we're on to number 3. Number 1 and 2 were threads from my previous podcast interviews with Mindy and with Helen. I guess not with Helen, but my interview with Mindy, pulling on that thread a little bit, and then last week's podcast about the ice raids and just building off of that in terms of what's inspiring me, how I'm thinking about things, and in particular, this particular flashpoint, this killing of Renee Good. But I, at the same time, just, it's like the most egregious in your face form of violence that we're seeing. And I just don't want anything I say to gloss over the everyday violence of ripping people apart from their families, of terrorizing people in their neighborhoods, of the violences that don't result in death, but are violent, and just the fear that people are living in right now, the fear that our neighbors are living in. So, as I talk about these things, I'm just holding that as well. So, I'm going to move on in my list. Helen named the emotion that she heard before in last week's podcast. I'm definitely feeling that right now. I've been feeling, I think, the weight of the world. And this is just one small piece of it. I think I said that last week too. There's a lot. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to hold. There's a lot to track. And also, I'm just trying to live my life as a human here. Aren't we all, right? I noticed I had been doing some stress eating. In particular, there's these boxes of chocolate covered cherries, the Queen Anne's that come out around Valentine's Day. And I have a funny relationship with them. I have eaten 4 boxes of Queen Anne's chocolate covered cherries in the last 2 or 3 weeks. And I usually eat them in almost one sitting. So it's a fair amount of sweetness when I do. And I think I started this year talking about wanting to explore intuitive eating. And intuitive eating really isn't about a specific diet or anything like that, but it's about building awareness. And for me, I have a desire to eat nutritious foods more consistently and to fuel my body. And I know that eating a box of Queen Anne's chocolate covered cordial cherries is not it. But it is oh so satisfying in the moment, and I know this. And I've been just kind of like paying attention to, okay, how do I want to course correct and on this and take like an additive approach. I happen to be listening to the Financial Feminist podcast, which I like to listen to, with Tori Dunlap. And her most recent podcast episode was about, or is about, the subconscious and goals. And listening to it got me thinking about kind of what kind of affirmations I wanted to give myself around eating and the role of it. And again, it's not like I'm never going to eat sweets or anything like that, but just being mindful of what I put in my body. The trainer Emily, that I work with, we just talked about feeding myself first, because sometimes I show up to our sessions and I'm like, oh, I haven't eaten. And, it's like I got my daughter to school and I ate, or I made sure she had food. Might have started working or whatever. But so we talked about feeding myself first. And so I've just been like, okay, playing with what does that look like? What do I want to feed myself? And so I was looking into affirmations related to intuitive eating. I think I found some ones that I liked. I'm going to pull up my notes. I have a healthy, balanced relationship with food. I like that. Each meal is a source of positive energy for me. Each day I choose foods that support my health. I eat foods that nourish my body. I take care of myself consciously and wisely. Those are some of the ones that were standing out to me. Those are from a different podcast episode that I just stumbled across. I'll have to credit that in the show notes too. And so there's that, but there's also the kind of nerve care aspect of it that sugar fulfills for me. And then I was remembering I studied herbalism and I like drinking herbal teas and tisanes, and I have knowledge of the very friendly adaptogenic plants. So, adaptogens is what I wanted to talk about. One of my favorites is Tulsi or holy basil, and it's a great adaptogen, a great tea that I can drink regularly. And to back up a minute, adaptogens are herbs that support our ability to be more resilient and withstand stress. And it's kind of like something that builds you up daily, something that's nourishing. There's also nervines and herbalism that provide more of that kind of deeper, more acute relaxation and support. That might be something that helps, like, I think valerian would be considered a nervine. It might help you sleep or might help you, like, have more of a sedative effect, like catnip. I might be mislabeling some of these herbs as nervines when they're not, but the idea behind adaptogens is that they help you kind of be resilient to stress on the daily, and then nervines help you with more immediate relaxation and calming the nervous system. So I was like, okay, I remember adaptogens. I'm going to integrate that more into my life. And yeah, so I wanted to share that. What I'm listening to these days, I mentioned the Financial Feminist podcast. There's, in general, a lot on personal finance, of course, in that podcast, but I think I liked this most recent one on goal setting and the role of the subconscious. And I listened to the Culture Study podcast with Anne Helen Peterson, and that's interesting to me. I had kind of a middle of the night session this week where I had gone to sleep putting my daughter to bed, and then I got up and was doing some chores at like midnight before going back to bed. And so I listened to the Culture Study podcast about what it would be like to have a truly family society. And that was, I enjoyed that episode thinking from the policy, like the big picture things like healthcare and leave, healthcare that's not tied to your job, generous leave policies related to not just dependent children, but other family members, and others in our world who needs like support and care. And so thinking about those big picture policy issues, but also just the design of spaces and cultural aspects of welcoming children into spaces and thinking about what it would look like to be a truly family friendly society and how that can benefit everybody, whether they are in kind of that idea of a nuclear family or not, but families of all configurations, people who are single, people who might have older parents, thinking about how that could benefit us. Yeah, I feel like there would be like some points from there that I could pull out and share, but I just want to share that that was interesting and I enjoyed thinking about that more deeply, what it would look like to have a truly family friendly society and how that benefits people beyond, like, say, parents. Even though parents are an important part of the equation. I started listening to culture study. I think it was around the time there was an episode on, I think it was called Is Personal Coaching a Scam? And then Anne Helen Peterson mentioned another podcast called The Dream, where they looked at like the culty side, the MLM to coaching pipeline, and the culty side of coaching, which I really didn't know much about. And I'm happy to say that that is not the coaching world that I'm in. That's not the type of coaching that I offer. Also, even in this podcast episode that was taking a look and asking the question, is personal coaching a scam? There, some of the participants there had benefited from coaching, and so it's definitely not a one size fits all or like a one experience sort of thing. And I always tell people anyone can call themselves a coach. So that's I don't know if it's a downside or upside of coaching, but that's the reality of coaching, is that it's good to ask about their training, their values, and to see if there's a fit. Anyway, number 5 on the list, I had previously talked about doing the Creative Dream tea parties and pivoted away from that. I wasn't feeling like facilitating a process and launching that in January. Maybe I'll do something later on in the year, but I am hosting community lunches, and it's a kind of like it's an informal setting. You can bring your own lunch or we'll put in an order together. And so the first one is going to be on Friday, January 30th, and then I'll be having them most second Fridays. So if you are listening and you're in the like Long Beach, LA, Southern California area, and that's interesting to you, you want to be invited to one, just let me know. I would love to connect with you and have lunch with you. And yeah. So there's that, an open invitation for you. Number 6, how am I taking care of myself? I think I've talked about this a little bit, but this question came up because my friend Oregon Emily, which eventually we will get her on the podcast, but one of my besties in Oregon, definitely my bestie in Oregon, Emily, she was hearing me talk about some of these things going on, like with my sugar indulgences, and asked how I was taking care of myself. And so today on Marco Polo, that's how we trade messages back and forth over Marco Polo pretty frequently. And so we were talking about I shared a little bit about what I'm doing and thinking about. And yeah, it's just like I'm getting coaching support right now. I'm starting to work with a coach one on one, which it's been a little while. I worked with a parent coach recently who is great. But I've just been noticing some hesitancy and some feelings coming up, even just starting the new year, and feeling like with my business that I'm starting back at zero just because the calendar turned over. And now I think part of it is because I count my income and track that all year. And so then now January, I'm like back to not quite zero because I have contracts already in, but it's just a reminder that I'm not really starting over. But there's been some parts of my business and consulting that have felt like a little sluggish. Maybe there's a little hesitancy and anxiety on my part, some fear. And so I've been wanting to just get some one on one support. So I'm excited to do that. Talking to my friends is how I take care of myself. Trading Marco Polos with Emily, going swimming with Janine, having dinner with the Fancies, who I can't wait for you to meet them. We're going to have dinner on Monday, and I'm going to record some of the conversation, maybe some of the process of us ordering food, and I'll tell you more about the Fancies, but I'm excited for that. Definitely doing great on my workout goals, and going to spin class tonight was an important part of taking care of myself. That was quite a workout. My goodness. And so I'm definitely in a better place than I was last year when I was starting my workout goals. I loved hearing from Emily. Oh, I guess I'll just say the other thing I shared with her is I've been going to sleep early, not tonight, but I've been going to sleep early, putting my daughter to bed and just sleeping more, and that's been really nice too. So yeah, talking with Emily today, she mentioned that Tulsi, which I just talked about, the herb holy basil. Why did I just try to not say the H? That's so funny. Holy basil. She said that's been coming up for her a lot. She's like, maybe I need to grow some. I'm like, yeah. And then she told me that yesterday, Tuesday, was National Cheese Day, and she felt like she hadn't really fully celebrated. So she had some brie in the fridge that she's going to eat, and I just love that. Oh, and she told me that she wrote a poem. Emily, I hope you don't mind that I'm just sharing all your business right now, but Emily and I went through a period of time about 10 years ago where we were emailing each other poems back and forth, and I loved it. And it's been a while since we've talked about poetry, and I was just really excited to hear that she's writing poems. So, Emily, you're going to have to send that to me. I will send you a Marco Polo that says all this as well. Okay. Finally, number 7, play. 2 years ago, play was one of my words, or like exploring play. That was something that I was trying to do. And I even did a workshop on rest and play for our public health department, and was exploring there's kind of like different categories of play, I think for adults especially, and karaoke is one of my favorite ways to play. It's just very cathartic and fun and pushes me out of my comfort zone a bit. But I was on a group called Today, as part of the Everyday Artist, that the community that I'm part of. I think I've mentioned it on a previous episode. But we're just talking about the way that kids play and like the fun around all of that. And suddenly it reminded, well, we were talking about different games, and one of the folks mentioned charades. And it reminded me of when I was in a role with the Building Healthy Communities Initiative. It was called Hub Manager. But anyway, there were these hub managers or executive director sorts across the state of California, and we would get together for retreats twice a year and then do other things like online and kind of get it's where I really learned the importance of peer support, especially when you're in a tough role and especially when folks in your organization, like maybe they all report to you or they have a different role than you. So anyway, one of the things that this group of colleagues would do that I got to be part of was do charades based on terms that were related to the work. So, for example, like the term collective impact. And there were just, it just became like this funny, because it's like lots of insider jargony words, and then it would become kind of like inside jokes as well. So I am curious to hear from you how you are playing these days, what play looks like for you, and what's making you laugh these days. And also, how are you taking care of yourself? Yeah. Okay, wow. This has been a really long episode. Thank you so much for listening to the show today. To support the Resourced and Resourceful Leadership podcast, please follow or subscribe to the show. Please also consider leaving a 5-star review and sharing the show with a few people you think would appreciate it. I will drop the link to SpeakPipe so you can share a voice recording with me there if you would like, or you can send me a message through my website. And once again, thank you so much. Take good care.